Welcome back, class. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate everyone that's actively been voluntarily doing some of these activities I've been sending out each week. I know it's not required, but it's one of those things that I think it's important to continue education. But again, these take a distant second place to your health. Take care of each other, take care of your families. But again, let's jump right in. Let's talk about kind of our topics today. What you're looking at here in front of you is you're looking at week 6, part 3, which we're going to go over the Google form information on the basic operations for decimals. I think that's important that we end kind of our major topics for the year with some stuff that you're going to use in real life. So decimals is one of them. So we're going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing decimals. That's kind of what our topic is. We have 4 problems from the Google form, and we're just going to go through them right now, and I'll pop up a calculator and stuff. But again, most of the stuff that I want to do is I want to do it with pen and paper, and then we can use the technology that we have to check our answers. That way you're getting a chance to try it out. Now I know some of these problems, like this one for instance is a multiplication. There's different ways to do this problem, right? You can do it by column method. You can do it by scaffolding or lattice, I guess that's what they call it. So I'm going to kind of show you both here and just kind of show you. So when we multiply decimals, you actually just ignore all the decimal places, and if there's a bunch of zeros, you ignore those. So like on this problem, I'm going to ignore all these zeros. I'm going to ignore this decimal point, and I'm basically taking 942 times 86. That's what I'm doing. In the very end, I'll go back and look at where the decimal places were on both numbers and then write those back in my final answer. That's how we do this. So now I'm going to do this first by column method, which you're seeing here. Then I'll do it by lattice, because I know some people don't like this column method, this way that I was taught in school. And then we'll use a calculator and see if we're right. All right, so what we have here is how you do column method. You always start with the bottom number, this rightmost number, and you just go to the top and you multiply it by these 3 numbers going right to left. So 6 times the 2, it's 12, right? And then you carry that second digit over to the next column. And you do the same thing. 4 times the 6, which is 24, because again, you're always multiplying. And then if there's any numbers, like in my case, I carried the 1 over, you have to add it in. So 4 times 6 is 24. I add the 1, I get 25. And I carry the next number over, which is a 2, because the second digit would carry. 6 times 9, that is what, 54, and then we add the 2, so that's 56. And I'll just write the 5, 6, because there's no other numbers to do, so I can just carry that number in. Again, you're doing kind of one number at a time, so really you just have to know single digit multiplication. So now, since I'm done with that, I'm going to erase some of these extra marks. I'm now moving on to the second number. So what I mean by that, now I'm moving on to the 8. And I'm going to multiply the 8 onto these numbers up here and do the exact same work. Now the 8 is technically in that second position. So I'm skipping over the 6. So I'm going to put what they call a guard dog, or an egg if you're in kind of elementary days. It's a positional holder. Because I'm skipping over the 6 is technically gone. And so the 8 is now 8 times 2, which is 16, carry the 1. 8 times the 4, which is 32, plus the 1, which is 33, carry the 3. 8 times the 9, which is 72, and I'm adding 3, which is 75. And now in multiplication, just like we always do, we always add. So you're adding straight down. So 2 plus 0, that's 2. 5 plus 6 is 11, carry the 1 over. 1 plus 6 is 7, plus the 3 is 10, so carry it over. 1 plus 5 is 6, plus the 5 is 11, so I'm going to carry the 1 over. And 1 plus 7 is 8. Now, that should be my final answer. The problem is the decimal is not in there. So what we do is we go back to the original problem, which is this one, and I count how many decimal places there were. So I'm going to put this in maybe orange. So the decimal places, there was 3 decimal places on this number. There was 2 decimal places on this one. So total, there should be 5 decimal places. So I'm going to start in the back and move this thing 5 spots. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my number, the decimal should be out front, should be this. 0.81012. Now, we have the technology. We can use a calculator, transition right to a calculator, and type some of these numbers in. All right, so what we have in my calculator here, we have the number 9.42. I didn't type a 9. Let me clear that out here. Clear. 9.42. There we go. I'm going to multiply that. By 0.086 and hit enter. 0.81012, which is the exact number that we just found. I know that seems really weird that some people aren't used to that. They're not used to seeing these types of numbers and how that transition worked that way. It's just one of those things that once you get used to it, it's just kind of a process you just have to learn. Now, some people, I'm going to go into this, some people have learned how to do this multiplication using a lattice method or a scaffolding, if you will, where you write down the numbers in columns. So like the 942 goes there, the other number was the 86, this number goes here, and you make like a little grid, so it's each number, you just put them like left and then up and down, and then in each box you fill in a diagonal. Because what we're going to do is we're going to multiply these I shouldn't say bold, but these darker blue colors, the 8 and 9, the 4 and 8, the 2 and the 8, the 2 and the 6, the 4 and the 6, so we're just going like column and row, and whatever that answer is, it should be a 2-digit number in theory. You write them into those little spaces. So you're going to see me do that here in a second. So like the 2 and the 8, I'm going to multiply those together. 2 times 8, that's 16. It's a 2-digit number, I fill in both spaces. If the answer ended up being a single digit, I would just put 0 in whatever the number is. So let's go to the next one, 4 and 8, because again, it's column and row, so 4 and 8. 4 times 8 is 32, so I put that number here. The 8 and 9, that multiplies is going to be 72. So as you can tell, I can always put the second digits in there. Let's go to the bottom row. So I'm still doing the top numbers, but I'm using that 6 now. So 2 times 6, that's 12. The 4 times 6, that's 24. And then the 6 times 9, which is 54. And again, if you didn't know those, you just type it in a cell phone or whatever. And now, when we're done, what you do is you add the numbers diagonally. That's why those little diagonals are in there, because you're adding like these numbers going this way. And if this ends up being a 2-digit number, you just carry the number over to the next diagonal. So I'm going to start in that bottom right corner. It ended up being a 2 down here. Then the next row was 6, 1, and 4. That's the diagonal going this way, so that would make 11. Carry the 1 over. 1 makes 2, plus 2 is 4, plus 2 is 6, plus 4 is 10. Carry the next one over. 1 plus 3 is 4, plus 2 is 6, plus 5 is 11. Carry the 1. And then the 1 plus 7 is 8. So adding those diagonals up, I'm ending up with 81012, which is exactly the same number I had earlier. And then you just fill in the decimal just like we did. And you count how many decimal places there are. There's 5 decimal places, so I put here and I move it 5 spaces to the front. So it ends up being the same answer anyway. So I know it's weird, but just 2 different ways to multiply. Let's jump right into the next problem here. Alright, so we're on problem number 2 of the Google form. We're adding decimals. Now, adding is important. We have to line up the decimal places. So you do have to line up the decimals when you add. When I multiplied, I didn't. I actually ignored them. And you can fill any, numbers in there with 0, so they all have the same, the same numbers underneath them. They're all lined up perfectly. And you start on the right side, kind of like when multiplying it, but you just go straight to the left. So 0 plus 6, that's 6. 0 plus 8 is 8. 9 plus 2 is 11. Carry the 1 over. 1 plus 4 is 5. And then 1 plus 0 is 1. And we just bring the decimal down. So it should be 15.18. Now, let's transition to a calculator and see how that worked. Looking at this, so let's type in my numbers here. So what we have, 14.2, and we're going to add the 0.986. We're going to hit enter. And boom, 15.186, just like we saw. Now, there's no other fancy way of doing this. This is just kind of the only way we have, so hopefully that made sense to you. Let's transition right to our next one. So this is the third problem on our Google form. We're subtracting. Subtraction, just like addition, you have to line up the decimals. So the first number is the 3.678. The second number is 0.679. and we're going to subtract these. Now again, we start on the right side and work our way to the left. Now if the top number is not bigger, we have to borrow. So like for instance, I'm starting in the very top right corner. 8 minus 9, I can't do that. 8 is too small, so I have to borrow from the row in front of it, the column I should say in front of it. So I'm going to borrow this, making this a 6. So when I borrow from that 7, making that a 6, this 8 became an 18. 18 minus 9, that ends up being a 9. So you just have to subtract straight down. Now 6 minus 7, I can't do that. The 6 is too small again, so I'm going to borrow from the column in front, making that a 5, and this is now a 16 instead. So 16 minus 7, well, it's 9 again. That's kind of nice. The 5 minus 6, I can't do that again, so I'm going to borrow from the row in front. This is now a 15. 15 minus 6 is a 9. And then 2 minus 0, which is 2. So it should be a 2.99. For the calculator here, and take a look at it again. So we have 3.678, and we're going to subtract 0.679. And boom, 2.999. There you go. All right, let's transition right back into our to our last problem here. This is the final problem on our Google form that we had. We're dividing. Now, this is the rule that we talked about in the Google, on the video from last week part 1, that if there's decimals on the outside, you have to move them. So I need to get rid of the decimal. So that's actually going to end up being a 64 on the outside. Now, what we have to look at is how many spaces did I have to move that decimal? Well, I had to move it 2 spots to get rid of that decimal, so it just ends up being a 64, not 0.64. So if you moved it 2 spots on the outside, you have to do the same to the inside because you have to keep it balanced. So if I move that decimal 2 spots, here's what I'm going to get. 57.728. All right, so that's the first step. Now what we need to do is actually divide these. Division is figure out, what I can take times, each of these numbers and then subtract. So like for instance, how many times can 64 go into 5? Well, it can't. 64 is too big. How many times can 64 go into 57? It can't. It's too big. How many times can 64 go into 577? And again, notice I ignored the decimal because I'm going to the next number and I'm just carrying those over. So 577. Well, if I just, kind of think about it, gosh, how many is that? So let's go to the calculator real quick. How many? So 64 times, let's see, 64 times 4. It's 200, so I can go bigger. Because again, I'm trying to get as close to 577 as I can. So 64 times, maybe let's go times 7. 448, I can still go bigger. 64 times 8. 512, ooh, we're getting close now. I think it might be that one. It might be times 8. So 64 times 9. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay, 576. So 64 times 9 is 576. Now, subtracting straight down, again, notice I'm ignoring the decimal. When I subtract straight down, the 7 minus 6 is 1. The rest of them are 0, so I don't need any of those. I want to bring down the next number, which is a 2. I'm ignoring these. I don't need the zeros. So now, can 64 go into 12? No, it can't. So I bring down the next number. Can 64 go into 128? Yes, it can. It can go in there exactly twice. 64 times 2 is exactly 128. When I subtract, I get 0. That's exactly what we want to have happen. We want it to either get to 0 for a remainder, which mine does, or it gets to a pattern where it starts repeating. And you notice that there's a pattern. It's like, oh, it's always come back to 5s every time. But in this case, we ended. Now, my final step is just to move the decimal straight up. And that is my answer. It's 0.902. Again, we can ignore the decimal up front. Or the extra 0, I should say, not the decimal. But this should be an answer. Now, let's take a look at the calculator here, and let's kind of see what we have. So, what we have is we have the number inside the house is the number I'm going to type in first. We have the 0.57728, and I'm going to divide by 0.64. Because again, you always type the number that you're dividing on the outside out last. 0.902. Now you're thinking, Ward, that wasn't the number that you did. I moved it. Okay, let's do that. So my number in the side of the house was it was 57.728, and I divided by the number on the outside, which was a nice 64. Same answer. So it's this weird way of just moving decimal places makes this process so much easier to look at. All right. Now I know that this is kind of a tough process to look at. it's one of those things that you just got to get used to. You got to get practice at doing, and that's why I thought this was kind of important. We get to look at this stuff. But again, thank you for those who are participating each week on some of these activities. Really appreciate it. Keep it up. I think we're still gonna keep doing it for the next foreseeable future, for the next few weeks. So again, try to stay ahead. Try to keep up when you get bored and stuff. But I know you guys are kind of itching to get outside and start socializing again. But again, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Have a good one. Bye.